Welcome to today's Explainer. When you think of Tokyo, you probably picture massive crosswalks, blinding neon lights, and a million people rushing around. But today, we're heading somewhere totally different. We're going to Shimokitazawa. This neighborhood has quietly but fiercely become Tokyo's indie coffee capital. If you're the kind of person who appreciates a genuinely good cup of coffee and you love diving into the very heartbeat of a local culture, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to take a structured look at this anti-chain coffee haven. We'll figure out how the neighborhood works, what makes its cafes just so incredibly special, and how you can navigate them like a total local.
So right off the bat, you're probably wondering, why is Shimokitazawa considered Tokyo's best coffee neighborhood? Well, the secret actually lies in what it doesn't have. There are absolutely no corporate chains here. None. Unlike the huge, busy areas near Tokyo's main stations, no single corporate giant runs the show. Instead, Shimokitazawa is packed with this amazingly high concentration of totally independent cafes. And what makes it absolute magic is how it takes decades of traditional, old-school coffeehouse culture and pairs it up with a brand new wave of ultra-serious, highly technical coffee roasters. And the best part? They aren't trying to run each other out of business. They survive right side by side, completely untouched by that sterile grab-and-go feel of everyday coffee shops.
No chains, no rushing. These aren't just trendy buzzwords. They are the literal rules of the neighborhood. The cafes here are the daytime alter ego of an area that is usually famous for its gritty live music venues and nightlife. Because of that deep indie streak, the cafes are tiny, they are intimately personal, and most importantly, they are actually worth slowing down for. In Shimokitaza, people linger. No one is tapping their foot waiting to rush you out the door. It's an environment specifically built for you to kill time between hitting up the vintage shops, sit quietly, and just let the morning unfold at its own pace.
Okay, let's get into the first section of our explainer, the duality, old school versus new wave.
To really get Shimokitazawa, we absolutely have to talk about the old school first, and that means understanding the Kissaten. Basically, a Kissaten is a traditional Japanese coffeehouse. It is so much slower and way more retro than any modern cafe you might be used to visiting back home. Picture dark wood-paneled rooms that predate the modern third-wave coffee movement by literal decades. They preserve the exact, unhurried pace and atmosphere of Japan's Showa era. They are legendary for their siphon coffee, their beautifully worn-in booths, and their famous morning service. This is basically a super affordable set where you get a cup of coffee paired with thick-cut, heavily buttered toast, and usually a hard-boiled egg. It's not just breakfast, it's an entire mood.
And this sets up such a cool duality in the neighborhood. On one hand, you have the retro Kissaten. It's slow-paced, they're brewing siphon coffee, serving up those comforting morning toast sets. But then, on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, sometimes literally right down the street, you have the specialty coffee wave. These places are hyper-modern. They have strict house rules, they are absolutely obsessed with single-origin pour-overs, and they pull these incredibly dense, concentrated shots of espresso. It's a direct, almost jarring contrast. You go from a slow, moody, quiet ritual to this precise and, frankly, sometimes intimidating modern technique. Honestly, you half expect a barista at the specialty spots to whip out a protractor to measure the angle of your pour-over.
Food and cafe writer Theo Nakagawa has this absolutely perfect rule of thumb for these modern spots. He says, order coffee black first at a specialty bar. If the beans are good, you will taste it, and you can always sweeten the second cup. And that hits the nail on the head. These specialty counters run strictly on single-origin beans and incredibly careful pour-overs. They're built for people who want to really taste the complex notes of the bean itself, not just drown it under a mountain of vanilla syrup.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, the 5 essential cafes. So we've broken down a roster of the absolute must-visit spots in the neighborhood, and I love this because every single one has a totally distinct personality. First up on the list is Bear Pond Espresso. This is a hardcore specialty shop, famous for its cult status counter and incredibly dense, almost punishing shots of house espresso, pulled with just obsessive care. Then you've got Maldev. This is kind of the gentle counterpoint to Bear Pond. It's still specialty coffee, but this is where you go to order a latte. They're known for stunning latte art and a much more relaxed vibe. Next is Trois Chambres. This is your classic, quintessential Kissaten. You come here, order the siphon coffee, and just let a whole hour slip by inside its refined, retro interior. Fourth on our list is Universal Bakes. This is a great bakery cafe where you can grab a cup of joe alongside an all-vegan bun. And finally, the wild card, Bookshop B&B. Here you can order a coffee or, hey, even a craft beer. They're famous for being an indie bookshop that hosts regular evening cultural events.
Actually, let's spotlight those last two for a second, because they perfectly capture the neighborhood's sheer range.
Bookshop B&B, which literally stands for Book and Beer, is, for my money, the most uniquely Shimokitazawa spot of them all. You can literally browse shelves of indie books with a cold beer or a coffee in your hand, just soaking in the literary evening culture. And Universal Bakes, it's the perfect easygoing stop between your heavier caffeine hits. Plus, their fresh breads completely prove how far vegan baking in Tokyo has actually come, which, if you think about it, is genuinely surprising in a city that is so heavily fueled by seafood and pork broth. Let's pivot to Section 3, Etiquette, Costs, and Lingering.
Now, like we said earlier, lingering is a massive part of the culture here, but there is absolutely an unspoken etiquette to doing it the right way. Here is the golden rule. Always, always order a drink to hold your seat. Also, you need to keep an eye out for posted time limits, especially during the busy weekend hours. Oh, and you absolutely must carry cash. A lot of these tiny counters and old-school Kissaten simply do not take credit cards. And a really big one here. At the super serious specialty bars, keep your voice down, make sure you read the room, and always ask the barista for permission before you go snapping photos.
You know, you might look at all this and assume a highly curated experience like this is going to totally break the bank. But it's actually a remarkably affordable habit. Let's look at the numbers. A standard drip coffee at a Kissaten will run you somewhere around 400 to 600 yen. If you step up to a specialty pour-over or a dense espresso, it's slightly more, usually around 500 to 800 yen. And the best part? That price is essentially buying your seat for as long as you reasonably want to sit there, nurse your drink, and read a book or do some work. It's a fantastic deal.
Okay, we're at our final section. Number 4, the ultimate morning crawl.
If you're sitting there wondering how to actually sequence all these spots, vintage and shopping editor Elise Brandt offers this absolutely brilliant logistical hack. She says, use coffee to time the shops. They open around 11 a.m., so a long morning cup is the smartest way to wait out the gap before the racks are ready. I mean, that is pure logistical genius, right? It completely solves that classic traveler's dilemma of what on earth to do with your early morning hours in a neighborhood where all the famous vintage clothing shops don't even unlock their doors until closer to midday.
So leaning right into Elise's advice, we've put together a curated, highly actionable timeline for your perfect Shimokitazawa morning. Think of this as your own personal insider secret. You're going to start early morning at Bear Pond Espresso. You grab a serious, highly concentrated shot to jolt you awake before the narrow little lanes start filling up with people. Then, by mid-morning, you intentionally pump the brakes. You head over to Troy Chambra's, order a beautiful siphon coffee, slide into one of those dark wood booths, and just take your sweet time. Finally, at midday, right before those vintage shops start rolling up their shutters, you swing by Universal Bakes for an easy, delicious vegan bun. It is just a deeply satisfying 3-part journey through the absolute best of Tokyo's indie coffee scene.
And that officially wraps up our explainer. We've unpacked the whole clashing duality of the retro Kissaten and the hyper-obsessive specialty bars. We went over the unspoken house rules, checked out the surprisingly affordable costs, and even mapped out the ultimate morning itinerary for you. So, as we finish up, I want to leave you with one final thought. In a world completely dominated by rushed, generic chain coffee, which side of Shimokitazawa will you slow down for first? Will you go hunting for that dense, ultra-modern espresso, or will you disappear into the quiet, retro ritual of a Showa-era coffeehouse? Thanks so much for learning along with me today. I really hope this explainer inspires you to seek out that perfect, unhurried cup on your very next adventure.